I think here's the other thing, and don't take this the wrong way, but I think that we live today in an age of emotionalism. And that emotionalism where we prioritize emotion above everything else, like you just said, what about, their flourishing or their psychological health? Well, what does that mean? Because if I was to go and ask the American Psychology Association, who have said that, traditional, conventional masculinity is a personality disorder, they would say that you and me and everybody else who has some sort of, an ounce of, testosterone in our bloodstream, we have a problem just because we're masculine, because we have that's where we're at. Right. So what is flourishing? What is psychologically healthy according to what our idea of it should be? And how do we come to that idea? So when I talked about how gynocentrism has sort of become something since 1965, along with that, we've been taught what I have said in my books as well is this idea that the female experience is the ideal experience. To be more like a woman. Like when back in the 1970s, it was always men need to become more emotionally available. Men need to become more emotional. Men need to express their emotions. Men need to get in touch with their feminine side. Men need to get in touch with their emotions, kind of thing, right? So it's this amping up of this idea that men need to become more like women, or need to at least identify with the female experience. And if you do that, then women will like you. And of course, guys took that to heart, and they go, well, that's great. Is that what I need to do? Because men are basically problem solvers, right? We're deductive problem solvers. I need sex. How do I get sex? I ask a woman what she wants. I become that. I get sex. I have kids, blah, blah, blah. So
when you say emotions, do you mean all of them? Happiness, sadness, anger, guilt?
Well, no. I wish. I wish there was a priority of emotions, because like women today will say, well, men need to get in touch with their emotions. Well, what they're really talking about is the emotions that complement whatever it is that woman's experience is. So when I say we live in a female correct society right now, that's part of that female correct society. The right way to think in gynocentrism is to think like a woman. I think it was it Camille I think it was Camille Paglia or somebody, I forget who said this, but it's like we've raised generations of boys as if they were defective girls.
Is it possible that they're doing fMRIs on adult men who have been trained throughout their life to experience emotion differently, and women who have been trained throughout their life to
possibly? But what's not the other part of this is that if you look at the studies and you look at the wiring, like the neurological wiring, what's interesting is that if you take a man's brain and his wiring, you place a woman's brain and her wiring on top of it, they are complements to one another. Like for men, it's usually along the longitudinal axis. For women, it's the latitude. So what they're suggesting anyways, and again, the science is not 100% settled on this, but what they're suggesting is that the things that make up women's natural proclivity, like the way that they like to communicate, for instance, when it comes to subcommunications, for women communicate differently from men. I think you probably have figured this one out, is that for like women can infer communication from just, the dirty looks, right? You can be right there in a party or something, and some girl will come by and she'll leave, and your girlfriend will go, did you see the dirty look that bitch just gave me? And you were right there in the party and you didn't see it happen, but she did. Because their level of communication, understanding subcommunications, is different from men's, because our brains are wired differently. Now, what women do when it comes to communication is they communicate covertly, whereas men communicate overtly. So when you're looking at, say, women's form of communication, it's usually about how did the communication make them feel. Women will get together just for the sake of talking. Just for, like, when women communicate, they communicate like straight up at you. When men communicate, we communicate this way. So when women are talking to one another, when women are interacting and talking about talking within their own language, it's usually based on the context of the conversation. So the priority is on how did the conversation make them feel. For right now, we're discussing things right now. We're transferring information. For men, our innate way of communicating is to transfer information and to focus on the content of that conversation. Now, we might later say, well, how did that make me feel? But the reason men come together is to solve a problem, is to do a project, to form a hunt, that kind of stuff. It's not so much about,
or is that because we're men, or because we don't really know each other well and we're on a podcast? Because I think back to being in a fraternity or hanging out with my closest friends, it's a lot of like what you'd call shooting the shit and just making each other laugh and saying things that have no talking about tattoos you're going to get that you're never going to get. It's outlandish. It's not based on anything but the idea of creating joy in the group. So I'm curious if that's a masculine versus feminine thing, or if this conversation is mostly because it's the first time we've ever spoken.
Okay. Well, I would say this is that the reason why most guys think that they are not communicating correctly, or guys will say this, I'll say this. When's the last time you called your buddy up and said, hey man, let's go get coffee and really connect, or let's go down to Starbucks and let's just talk about, our feelings, or talk, like get together to talk just for the sake of talking. When it comes to men do, women talk. So when men communicate, they tend to have a project. They tend to have let's go fix the car. We have common interests. When men form tribes, it's usually around common interests. So like if you're in a band, or if you like to surf and you got your buddies there that like to surf, or you've got guys who want to, who are your workout partners or something, you have a project that you're actually working on. And that's where communication takes place between men. So if you're in a fraternity or something like that, maybe you've got some sort of common interest between all of you guys. For women, it's usually it's the act of communication itself is what generates the feels, is what generates which makes a conversation memorable and makes a conversation valuable. So when we talk about gossip, when we're talking about other people, it's the emotions that are part of that communication that make that communication something that they want to engage in. For men, it's the information. It's let's go do something, and then communication is shared amongst those guys. But what you're going to say now is that, well, I don't do that. I go and I hang out with my friends, or I'm there for them. Well, the problem is that when you do stuff like that, it's usually because you've been taught that that's what you should do. When you are, I think there was was in the Boston Globe. There was an article in the Boston Globe, and I think it was 2018, where they were talking about men who were 45 to 65 years old, which is the prime cohort for suicide for men. And they were saying, why are all these men, like 5 times as many men are killing themselves as women? And it all generally comes from that 45 to 65-year-old cohort. Why is that? Well, the Boston Globe went to great detail to say, well, they don't have social networks. They don't have real friends. They don't communicate. They don't go do these things. They isolate themselves and everything else. But what they're not, the whole article missed is that that's not how men communicate. They don't communicate naturally. They don't communicate like women. They would rather have guys that they go and have something in common with.
I'd love to bring this back to the emotion thing for a second too, because personally, in my friend group, and maybe we're just outliers, I don't see a lot of people who I would say are being pushed to be more emotional by their women. I actually see a lot of men who are trying to be stoic, who don't try to have negative emotions. Maybe anger's okay, but sadness never, I myself haven't cried in 20 years, and I think that's from software. I don't think that's my firmware. I think that's programming to try to be masculine, to try to impress men or attract women. Mm-hmm. And so I would not have said that society is pushing men to be more emotional. I actually would have said that there is a press in the United States, at least, for men to hide their emotions. And if you're going to cry, you can cry, but get to your room, get alone and then cry, and then come out when you have a solution to the problem. And I would say that my experience does jive with the fact that if men are committing a lot of suicide at 45, those men probably don't have someone they can talk to about their problems. And so they do feel alone and trapped. And then they try to problem solve and they can't figure out how to make the real world change, and then they just give up and kill themselves. So
yeah, and I would agree with you on that, and especially on that part right there, because guys don't have those tribes anymore. Like when I'm talking to guys who want counseling from me, the first thing I say is, do you have tribes? Do you have, what's your family like? Do you have a group of guys that you hang out with? 90% of them say they don't. And I think that has more to do, I think, with sort of this internet isolation, behind the screen kind of thing. Like most of the people that these guys know that they have any kind of social interaction with are just digits on the screen, or just like a face on the screen kind of thing. They don't have actually, a connection between them. So I would agree with you on that. I would also, I would say this is that I see this every time we have a mass shooting event with, say, Nicholas Cruz, or a kid who goes to a high school kid who goes and blasts his high school up. It's usually an emotional outburst. And the first thing that comes out of the media is that, well, society is teaching these guys not to get in touch with their emotions. Society has taught, like this nebulous society. It's funny to me because, again, it's kind of like this old order way of thinking, but it's this idea that like boys are just taught by these really tough drill sergeants who say, you don't cry and you don't do these things. And that era is long gone. And I would say that from the last 4 generations at least, men have been taught, get in touch with your emotions, in fact, when we say...
Is there data on that? Because that's not my experience with my friend group.
Well, no, maybe it's not your experience with your friend group, but are you... and again, take this as you will, but a lot of guys who are in that, who say, well, I was bullied, or like they don't understand how to interact with other guys, or they don't understand masculinity. They're taught that masculinity is bad. They're demonized masculinity as saying that it's toxic, or that the aspects of masculinity that don't serve a feminine purpose. Those are the aspects that are toxic. Whereas the ones that, maybe anger and aggression, those are emotions as well. Those ones are not acceptable. But when we're all loving and, in a drum circle, then those are the ones that are
I'm just saying, I'm 33. So that's my generation. That's my age. But like my friend's dad was military and he was very tough. I don't.
Again, it's tough to find.
I know. Yeah,
it doesn't jive with my world either.
My question is there data on it? I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not saying my friend group is all there is. I'm just saying I would never have posited, based on my life, that tough fathers are gone. In fact, I don't know any fathers that encouraged their sons.
Well, I think what I'm seeing here is fundamentally, it sounds like we are living in the same world. And I think that the way that you view it is, of course, books that you've read, but also personal experience. And it sounds like you mentioned earlier prior to this that you came to this by interacting primarily with 45 to 65-year-old men who
in the beginning anyways.
Yeah. And then that has formed a thing. I think that we're just talking to different people in different things.
Totally
and maybe the world has moved more in one direction or the other. I don't know.
I think that in a gynocentric social order, it serves a purpose to cling on to the idea that patriarchy is teaching toxic masculinity to young men, when in fact, for the last 4 generations, we've taught our boys as if they are defective girls. 77% of teachers from kindergarten even to postgraduate school right now are taught by our female teachers. They are teaching classes. I was joking about this the other day when we were talking about why do we have so much communism in our schools right now? Because we're having this debate about Antifa and all the stuff that's going on. And why is it so popular why is socialism a thing, or why is that a popular thing? Well, you've got women who are teaching, underpaid teachers, granted, teaching kids in schools to be more emotional and to express those emotions and to teach those classes, boys or girls, in a framework that is a feminine framework. So we have a higher incidence of prescription of ADHD drugs like Ritalin and Adderall for boys than we do for girls, because if a boy wants to be a boy, we tell him you're a bad boy. In fact, there's a meme out right now. It says boys will be boys, and they cross out the last boys and they say boys will be good humans. So what does that tell a guy? What does that tell a little boy? Well, if I'm a boy, I'm not a good human. So I need to learn to be a good human. Teach me to be a good human, because I don't want to be a bad human. So when you have that message repeated over and over again, when you look at even our classic stories like Disney and Pixar kind of stuff, there's nothing for boys anymore. There's nothing that is sort of a boy's adventure kind of thing. And God forbid we do that, because if we do, then there'll be protests outside the movie theaters because it doesn't have a strong female lead in it.
Except for Onward, that was just a bad movie. Onward was only boys, but it just wasn't very good to watch.
Right. Well, what I've said is this: I think that these are old lies. The old lies are this: is that, well, the society is teaching boys to repress their emotions, to tamp it all down. And then that's why we get toxic masculinity. That's why we get mass shootings, because these boys have been taught that it's not okay to cry, that it's not okay to do these things. And that is simply not what, at least from my experience and from what I'm reading these days, and in every new incident of this kind of stuff, is it's always an emotional outburst. So when you look at a guy like Nicholas Cruz, the guy, you're talking about a generation of kids, a generation of boys who don't have fathers. First of all, let's talk about, you want to talk about fatherless homes. There's that aspect of it as well. So you can say, well, my dad was a drill sergeant or whatever. Great. But a vast majority of young men don't have a man or a masculine influence in the home right now. As I said, 42% of births in the United States are out of wedlock. So does that mean there's not a masculine influence? I don't know. I can't speak to every single one. The fact is we've systematically removed men and masculinity from this society. So to say that they're getting this influence and it's still this 1950s, tough coach, drill sergeant, boys don't cry, smack you upside the head, bullying kind of thing. I think what's happened is at least the last two generations of young men don't know how to interact with other men because for a very long time they've been taught that their gender is bad. Their gender is to gender loathe.
Totally. I don't know what it's like to be 14. I have no idea. I can only speak to being 33 and interacting with men from age 25 to 40. So if you're telling me that's what's happening at 12-year-olds, I have no idea.
Well, let me ask you that. So you're at 30, let's just say 30. What did you say? 33. At 33 years old, if somebody asked you, what does it mean to be masculine? Like, what would you say? Would you know what to say?
I think it's trained. I honestly think it's learned from society. It's to be masculine is to be strong. It's to be able to protect the people around you. It's to be aggressive. It's to be tall and muscular. It's to be wealthy and financially successful. It's to be ambitious. It's
Stoic,
to be leader.
right?
It's to not show emotion. So it's to be someone that when you run up against a problem, you run through that wall. You don't quit. You are persistent. That's the
persistence.
That's the first thing that kind of comes through mind.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I mean, I have a similar thing, and well, I'm curious. I presume you're going somewhere with that. So
yeah, well, I'm asking that because there's a lot of I won't say counter movements to the red pill, but there's a lot of guys. Like if you go and you look at organizations like the Good Man Project, there's another one called Are We Man Enough or something. And the reason I was asking that is because a lot of guys can't answer that, or they will make it subjective, or it's confusing. Or they'll say, I don't know what it means to be a man. I can't live up to those standards. I can't live like that. It's all just social constructionism. There's no actual biological, factors that make a man and a woman kind of thing. And that's how you get, that's an extension of blank slate equalism, but it's also sort of a denial of human nature. So
I'm not saying my answer is right. I'm just saying that's what I've been taught or grown up in.
Yeah, well, see, you're saying that it's a lot of the aspects and a lot of the qualities you just rattled off there. You're saying are social construction, right? Like, well, that's just what society says we're supposed to be, and not what we really are. How much of those aspects are something that are innate to you as a human male on planet Earth, and how many of those are things that, or maybe they were modified by social, like by the nature is modified by the nurture.
Yeah. Well, I don't think it would be possible for me to know, right?
Yeah, this is.
I was
I feel like we keep
when I was
coming
born,
back.
and now I'm 33.
Well,
and I have memories
so here's my point. My point is this: is that we tend to subjectivize masculinity right now. My third book is called Positive Masculinity, and I get into this in there, is that what we've done is you'll never hear me refer to masculinity as traditional masculinity. Traditional masculinity is specific to a culture or an ethnicity or whatever. So my idea of what should be traditionally masculine might differ from yours or from Black persons, from Chinese person, whatever. But in that book, I outlined the aspects of conventional masculinity, and so I'll refer to it as conventional, meaning that there are aspects of your body, of the way that your brain is wired, the hormones that are in your body, the ability for you to make more muscle or to grow a beard, those kinds of things. Those are parts of the biology that makes you a man, and from there you can modify those things as you see fit. But right now we tell boys that it's bad to be a boy. It's bad to be these things. It's bad to be, you don't want to be toxically masculine. You don't want to overstep your bounds. You don't want to assume any kind of responsibility or assume any kind of authority. You want to please take more and more responsibility.
Well, it's interesting to think about too, because let's say that someone can't grow a beard. Let's say that someone has a small penis.
Dude,
let's say someone
take it easy.
No, and let's say that they're successful in the ways that matter to them. Are they less masculine? Do they care that they're less masculine? Should they care? And let's say let's say that they hear all this and they go, you know what? I really don't care if you think I'm masculine or not. I'm 5'4", I can't grow a beard, but I'm happier than you. Is that not the most alpha mindset they could possibly have? So I guess that's kind of my questions around masculine and feminine, is like, how much does it matter how masculine you are? And is the question really just, is what you're doing working for you? And are you happy? And if you don't like the results you're getting, then let's diagnose it. And maybe it's because based on what you want, you would get better results if you acted more masculine without an inherent, without any inherent value to.
Well, you're also, you're qualifying it by the end state goal is, am I happy? Right. Again, an emotion, but am I happy about the way I am? Am I happy the way that, and there's a lot of people who are very happy about what it is they're doing. It's when they express that and say that this should be the norm and you will be happy because of this, is where I got to draw the line. So when, when it's like drag queen story hour at the library, it's like, oh, it makes the kids happy. They're happy. Is that something that's constructive to society? Is that going to be for the benefit of society? I don't know. I'm not going to make a judgment call about that.
Hope that you guys enjoyed that clip. If you want to see more like this and have us do more podcasts, we are 100% funded by our generous patrons. And if you'd like to contribute, there's a link in the description, and we'll have one pop up on the screen right here so that we can do more podcasts where we have fun conversations and hopefully some deep ones like this. Either way, hope that you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one.